Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these videos every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those of you who are very familiar with this series, welcome back. This is my reading wrap up from the 21st to the 29th of April. Aside from the reading that I did manage to finish David Attenborough's Our Planet on Netflix, which I really enjoyed even though it made me cry like every single episode. And I also finished Star Trek Discovery Season 2, and I have started rewatching Season 2 because I really enjoyed it. And then I did my reading. And while I've read a lot of things this week, most of them were relatively short, so I've sort of been balancing out my reading and my viewing, because while I'm in the mood to watch TV and movies, I'm going to do it, because eventually I'm going to not want to look at my TV screen at all. That's just the way it goes with me. It goes in cycles. I read 8 books this week. 2 of them were non-fiction, 6 were fiction books. 1 middle grade, 2 YA, the rest were adult. I read 1 short story, 1 novella, 4 novels, and 2 sort of text type-ish books, which I'll get into in a minute. I read 1,664 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 109 books. The first book that I finished this week was Understanding Texts and Readers by Jennifer Cerevallo. This is obviously a textish type of book for work, and this is all about knowing your students as readers and knowing the texts that they like, and then also being able to help them work through those texts and ask lots of questions and be able to develop their comprehension. This is a shorter version of some of her other books. It is her most recent one, I believe, and it is very practical, very hands-on. I've got tabs for all the things that I want to try out and refer back to in the classroom, so I'm very glad that I read this one. This one was a lot easier to get through. There's a bit more of a flow through it than her reading and writing strategies books, which are very much based on skill development one at a time. Understanding Texts was published in 2018 by Heinemann. And while I'm talking about the textish type of books that I'm reading, I also read Writer's Workshop, The Essential Guide by Ralph Fletcher and Joanne Portaluppi. I don't know, I could be saying that horribly wrong. This was published in 2001 by Heinemann, and this obviously looks at the Writer's Workshop, which is something that I've implemented in my classroom. This really has a lot of stories and tips about what you can do to go about bringing the best Writer's Workshop writing experience for your kids. Lots of really great ideas, lots of very similar philosophy to me, which was nice, but very quick and easy to read. Then I read A Small Free Kiss in the Dark by Glenda Miller. This is a Love Osway A story that was published in 2009 by Allen and Unwin, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is a dystopian story. It follows the main character Skip, who is an outsider. He's living in a very tough home situation, and so he takes off and lives on the streets. He becomes friends with an older gentleman called Billy who sort of looks out for Skip until the unthinkable happens and a war comes to what sounds like Australia, but I was really having a hard time getting a handle on where in Australia it was. It sounded like Melbourne, but it also didn't, so it could sort of be set anywhere. But to me, it felt like Melbourne, just some of the locations sounded like familiar places, but at the same time, there was enough of a difference that it could really be anywhere. And Skip and Billy have to flee the city in order to stay safe because looting is happening and there's not enough food and people are starting to become desperate. And so they eventually take refuge in a derelict carnival site. There they meet Tia and her infant daughter Sixpence, and it's about how the 4 of them survive in these circumstances. For this cover, this story was very dark and not at all what I expected. This was lent to me by a friend who recommended that I read it, and I'm glad that I did. I love Glenda Millard's writing. I love anything to do with Australian young adult writing. As with most things, I don't tend to look up what they're about before I read them, and so this sort of took me by surprise. But it was very well written and very harrowing at times, and you just sit there and you understand some of the things that Skip doesn't, because he's, I think, only in his mid-teens, so he doesn't understand everything that's going on, but we as the reader infer what's going on, and some of it is quite heartbreaking. Well worth checking out if you like looking at Aussie YA backlists. Then I read Make Me Need by Katie Roberts. This is book 4 in the Make Me series. It is going to be released in July 2019 by Harlequin Dare, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I got this as a review from NetGalley just because I'm trying out different books in different Harlequin lines, and this is obviously on the steamier side of their books. But you know what? I don't care. I need some of that light reading every now and then. It follows Trish, who is a 25-year-old woman who is a bit down on her luck. She's graduated from college, but she isn't able to do anything with her degree currently because the degree she wants to go into requires quite a bit of practical experience before you can actually get a foot in the door, and she just doesn't have that. And so her brother, who owns a tech security company that is doing really, really well, hires her as the office manager for the site. He's off on paternity leave, so his business partner Cameron is the only one in the office at the time being, and when Trish walks in, basically the office is a shambles, very dusty, dirty, there's nothing sort of welcoming about it, and she sets about setting up the office for the boys. She struggles to work with Cameron, who, while attractive, has very, very terrible people skills. Frankly, he's a bit of an asshole, but at the same time, he acknowledges that he is really, really bad at people when he doesn't understand why what he's said has offended people. And then he has to try and work out for himself how he can go about fixing that. So it's not like it's not an unacknowledged thing, it is acknowledged quite a bit. That was sort of its saving grace for me. The two of them have a really strong attraction. There's a whole bunch of really embarrassing situations that sort of put them into awkward positions, and then the two of them have to fly out to London to meet with a prospective client, and that's sort of where their relationship takes off. And then it's really about them negotiating whether or not this is a long-term viable relationship. Like all romance stories, it has its ups, its downs, people make mistakes, and then you know, you have your sort of happily ever after at the end. That's just sort of the format of the genre. I enjoyed it for what it was. I don't know if I'll go back and read the rest of the books in the series. You definitely don't need to read them before you read this book, but it was fun and I enjoyed it. Then I read another NetGalley arc, and this was Wed, Red and Dead by E.M. Burns. And this is book 4 in the Mystery Bookshop series. I read book 3 last year. It's funny because I remember thinking when I read that third book, I probably won't read any other books in the series. It was okay, but it wasn't sort of what I was after. And then I requested the book 4 because I forgot that I'd thought that. It was okay. It's already published. It came out, I think, in April this year. It's published by Kensington Publishing Company, and I gave it 3.5. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfectly fine book. I just don't always connect with all the characters. This story follows Sam, who's a widower who owns a bookshop, and she sort of takes in strays. She's adopted one of the local college football players because he needed someone in his corner, and now he lives above her garage, and she is very close to her grandmother who lives in a retirement village and sometimes at Sam's place. And they both have friends from the retirement village, and they're all very much into solving mysteries and all that sort of thing. Sam's mother is about to get married, and she's marrying a very wealthy gentleman whose family don't really approve of Sam's mother or her family. Her mother's future sister-in-law decides to help by hiring a wedding planner, and the wedding planner happens to be an absolutely horrendous human being. After causing quite a bit of grief, the wedding planner ends up murdered, and Sam, her grandmother, and their friends decide to try and investigate this murder. There's also a subplot with some missing children, and the whole thing was just enjoyable. It's one of those sit down on the couch one afternoon with a cup of tea and just enjoy a bit of a cozy mystery, and that's fine. Then I read Gunslinger Girl by Lindsay Eli. This is a 2018 release from the Jimmy Patterson Presents line from Little Brown Books. This is a YA dystopian Western style book, and it follows Pitty Jones, who is living in a commune after something has happened to the world, and basically the United States has segregated into small groups. And you have, I think it was like the Second Civil War caused this. The commune Pitty is living in really doesn't value women at all, because they are basically sold off to people so that they can breed, which is, you know, horrendous. And her father is horrific. He's not a very nice gentleman. At the start of this book, he has sold Pitty off because he needs to make a profit, and he wants her out of his house and out of his responsibility. But Pitty is determined to escape, and so with her best friend Finn, they leave the commune, and then something terrible happens, and Pitty has to continue on alone and ends up being picked up by a troupe of performers from a town called Cessation, which is sort of like the Sin City of this world. There she is taken in to this theatre troupe as a sharpshooter. It's sort of what happens in there and her learning all the rules and the expectations of it's like living in basically a lawless town. I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was by no means groundbreaking in terms of YA books, but it was entertaining, and I liked Pitty. I liked the characters that surrounded her, and I like that she has to make very morally grey decisions constantly once she gets to Cessation. It's very politically motivated. I liked hearing about all the acts in the theatre troupe, which is more like a circus really. I shouldn't say theatre troupe, it's more like a circus. It was you know, entertaining and a great way to spend a couple of nights just sort of making my way through this, which was one of my book haul revisited books, which I have now finished. The last two books that I read while I was at the hairdresser's. New hair, this is my autumn hair. And they were short stories and novellas that I just decided to read because they were short and I would sort of get through them in the couple of hours that I was at the hairdresser's. So the first one was The Dagger in the Desk by Jonathan Stroud, which is book 1.5 in the Lockwood & Co. series. It was published in 2015 by RCHP Digital, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was okay. Again, it was narrated by Lucy Carlyle, who narrates the rest of the books in the series, and the Lockwood & Co. group are hired to investigate a haunting at a very prestigious school, and they have to go there after dark, and it's all the school library and, you know, cleaning closets and empty classrooms and that sort of spooky vibe. I don't know what it was about it, but it didn't hook me as much. And I think it might just have been the short story aspect of it because I'm so used to being immersed in the world, especially having just finished reading the last couple of books. It wasn't bad by any means. I think I like the bigger world and the bigger subplots going around short stories. So there's that, but you know, I'm glad I read it. The last book that I read was The Test by Sylvain Novelle, which is a novella that he released this year. No, it was this year. And it came out with Tor, and again, I gave this one 3.5. I can't really talk about this book because I think if I do, it's going to give away what it is. What I will say is that it is a real speculative fiction look at what could happen with immigration testing. And this is immigration testing taking place in Britain and how they're sort of identifying who would be the ideal citizens to live in the country. And that's all I'm going to say because it was confronting and scary. Scary in a way that I could totally see it happening. And that's sort of not the best way to think about how we accept people into our countries, but I could totally see it happening. So, you know, that was the scary aspect of it. If you like Sylvain Nouvelle's work, I would recommend you check it out, but it is very weird. I think if you're familiar with his work style, with his writing style, it will be fine. So those are the books that I read this week. Imagine my Kindle sitting on top of it. In the comments, let me know what you have been reading in the last 7 days and if you have read any of these books that I have read or if you are planning on picking them up in the future. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.